one of the things you had said was, are we news talk, are we talk, are we news? Expand on that, because we didn't get to finish
this
that.
is kind of one of the things that I've been saying a lot over the past year or so. Rush Limbaugh used to say, you can get the news anywhere, but this is the only place you can get it from me. Guess what, folks? You can get the news anywhere now. But this is the only place you can get it from Scott Jennings. This is the only place you can get it from Larry Minty on WOR or whoever they are. And I think that we, as people who love this industry and have seen it evolve, we really need to lean into the fact that, as Rush said, you can get the news anywhere. But this is the only place that you can get it from Sean Hannity. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that puts the onus on personalities, and you are a personality. You're on the air in addition to programming in Kansas City. How do you spin that ball? How do you juggle those two things? And is the onus more on being a personality or a programmer in your world?
Well, for me, it's always been personality, but I look at the competition and it continues to dwindle with syndication growing and music stations kind of being a shell of what they used to be. I think more people are looking for just personality-driven talk, especially on the local level. Not so much syndication, but especially on the local level. Your competition in the music lane is not there anymore. There really is not a lot of that going on in certain markets in particular. So I broadened the tent, and I broadened the umbrella topic-wise to say, yes, we're going to do the hard news of the day. We'll do the politics and the news and the local stuff, but we'll do a lot of culture. We'll mix in a lot of personality, because I think, as Chris alluded to, that's our best way to survive as on-air talent. I just think there's a lot more of that we have to lean into and take ourselves out of that lane of we just talk about X. Well, if people love you as a personality, they'll listen to you talk about a lot of different things. They want to learn more about you. And I think that's something that every talent should be leaning into right now.
And I think, Drew, you have a lot of heritage radio stations as well as those stations that are newer. What's the development level between someone who's new to a heritage station or someone who is new on a news station? Meaning, if you added a new talent in St. Louis on KMOX, and they're brand new but it's a heritage station, do you start with talking about the heritage in the audience, or do you just let them loose to be them?
I think let them loose to be them, to be honest with you. And I think if using the KMOX example, and I wish Steve Moore were here to tell the story for himself, but the KMOX just went through an amazing transformation, moving from AM to FM, a move that really proud of and very excited about to see how that moves the needle in St. Louis. But that brings with it a different audience often. And so, there's a process that happens, and it happens before the move goes to FM. As many people probably in this room have been through those kind of transitions before. Certainly KMOX is not the first to do so. So I think in that case, somebody new and vibrant that brings a new set of opinions, perspectives, and guidance to potentially a new audience can be a really dynamic move for a station.
Phil, in your company, we saw a major commitment to spoken word. The music stations have gone away. It's really on the spoken word format and where you're going. Where do you see the format going? Obviously, your company is using every part of the cow on a lot of different platforms.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, we did sell the music stations, but we are committed to the talk side. And that's important because there's such great synergy in Salem between the Christians teach and talk stations that were the bread and butter of Salem for many years and the news talk. Years ago, they determined that when a Christian listener would leave a CTT station, they would frequently go to a news talk station. So very wisely, Ed Atzinger and the powers that be there started buying up the number 3 AM in a lot of these markets. And we couldn't really afford the number 1 or the number 2, but the number 3 that wasn't really doing so well, we could afford. So we bought those stations, and we've turned them into something profitable. In Chicago, WIND had a great signal. Now it's got a great talk format that we've had for years. Los Angeles, KRLA, the same thing. New York City, WNYM, AM 970. We have to compete with WABC now, which was my old station, and I root for them all the time because they do so well. But what we found is, it's a great compliment for the network. It's a great place to build the network because, one of the real problems in being in the syndication world is if you don't own the stations, they are vulnerable to change. If you do own the station, they're not, because we can actually tell them, no, you're going to keep Mike Gallagher. And so it gives us a certain amount of stability to make this format work. And so they're a great combination between the two.
Yeah, and Chris, similarly, you have not only big Heritage News Talks and big Heritage News stations, but you have the Black Information Network, you oversee sports. What's the common thread in the lines between all those various spoken word stations?
Well, I think that, again, I'm going to quote somebody else, Jack Swanson. One of his great lines was, he said, "To inform without entertaining is time squandered." And I think that there's a lot to that. When you go on and if you're in the news and information business, and I think that we all are, we also have to realize that there is a certain amount of entertainment, not even entertainment, but it is entertainment, really, because you have to keep people listening to you. We talked about the Nielsen thing earlier. I think the 3 minutes is really interesting. They used to say in music radio, and I'm sure you said this, a good song shouldn't last over 3 minutes, right? I think it's the same thing with an interview. It's very rare that you're going to want to go over 3 minutes and have an interview, unless it is someone like the president, and that 4 or 5 or 6 minute interview better be compelling too. So I think that just kind of a recognition, to answer your question, you want to provide the best content and keep people listening as long as possible.
Can I just double click on a point that Chris just made? I think, we tend to forget. We get in our little circle and bubble, and I think we listen to the hosts that we connect with, right? We, as an industry, Pete, you probably listen to other conservative talk show hosts. Obviously you do. And I think we have to be cautious of the echo chamber. I think it's a real challenge for our industry right now. And I think we've forgotten sometimes that our mission, number one, is to entertain. Now, entertaining means a lot of things to a lot of different people. It doesn't mean being the funniest guy in the room necessarily, but it does mean we have to be entertaining. And I think sometimes hosts just get into a rhythm of feeling like, I've got to do what I think my audience wants me to deliver today, and they get onto talking points, or they get onto a thing that you feel like maybe you've heard a time or two. And I think sometimes that's where we've lost the value, the entertainment value sometimes that comes from great talk show hosts.
That's right. You have to do both. I mean, and Scott Jennings said it so well. He grew up on Rush Limbaugh, who arguably was the greatest entertainer that radio ever produced. And yet, Rush was able to combine the information that he was providing. He's very conservative and reached that audience. I mean, what did you think about when the first time you ever heard Rush Limbaugh? Eureka, he's saying what I'm already thinking. And if you can find somebody who can do that in an entertaining way, you've got a magic show. Scott Jennings, I haven't had to teach him how to do radio. That was the cool thing about bringing him on. He already knew, and he knew from the greatest entertainer there ever was, because that's when he was a teenager, he went to school on Rush Limbaugh. And then, of course, Paul Harvey, who was the greatest informer there ever was. And so he mixes and matches those styles. The other guy I wanted to mention that grew up on Rush Limbaugh is Charlie Kirk. When he was 12 years old, he was listening to Charlie Kirk on WLS in Chicago. He was listening to Rush Limbaugh. So, they learned from the best. And so we'll never be able to thank Rush enough for teaching and educating a whole group of new talk show hosts that are coming up that still remember how Rush did it.
And I think more, just to echo you there, I think more than Rush being about conservative politics, Rush was an entertainer first. And so sometimes I think when we have young talent and we think about who are they emulating, who are they paying attention to, who are they monitoring, they need to remember entertainment comes first, and not just the political sphere.
And the other thing too, if you don't mind me adding, Rush didn't allow people to force feed to him what he was supposed to sound like.
Rush was fired 7 times because he wouldn't listen to the program director. Well, thank God that he didn't listen to the program director. And I teach this to young PDs all the time. You don't want to find somebody that you can put in their head the thought that they're supposed to say out of the radio. You can't manipulate them like they're, puppets on a string. You don't want that type. If I have to hire that type of host, I've hired the wrong one. I want to hire a host who wakes up every day with a show screaming to get off his chest. And it can't be a show I put there. It has to be a show that he put there. Go ahead.
There's so many, first up, Craig, how many years how long ago did Rush pass? 4 years? And so think about that we're sitting here 4 years later, talking about the amazing things he did. And there are other talent out there. But to what you had just said, Phil, Rush and Hannity were my guilty pleasure. We would rent a house in Hilton Head for a couple weeks every summer because the kids were out of school and go, and I would lie at the pool from noon to 6. That was daddy time. Leave daddy alone so I could listen to Rush for his 3 hours and sell Nantucket Nectar or whatever the soft drink was, and then Hannity. And there are people today out there doing that kind of radio. But to your point, a lot of times local talent are saying those talking points that national talent say. And so, Pete, you're overseeing a lot of local shows in your group. What's the message? How do you get them to stop using, because frankly, if they're going to say what I'm going to hear in the national shows, why do I need to listen to them?
Well, you don't, and that's the thing. The question is, how do you localize a lot of this? And this crime situation in D.C. is a great example. It's being driven by people who work at cable networks that live in D.C. and live in New York. 90% of people listening to national talk radio don't want to go to D.C., haven't been to D.C., and don't think about D.C. But you look at some of the highest crime rates in this country based on homicide numbers, it's Kansas City, it's St. Louis, it's Memphis. There's a lot of places that this connects around America that relate to the story on a local level. If you're a national host, talk about those cities. Connect with people in Middle America by talking about what's happening in their towns. And if you're a local host, this is an easy way to weave the national story into your community. If you're just looking at Fox or CNN and copying what they're saying, why would anyone listen to you? You're a local show. You're a local talent. Weave it into what's happening in your backyard. What are your crime issues? And I have not heard enough of that on that specific issue the last couple of weeks, and I think it's a major missed opportunity.
What about talent? Where do you, Chris, I want to start with you, and I'll ask this of everyone. But where are you finding new talent today? How are you developing those talent?
Well, I think you have to, and I think we all have always looked to people who they have to be smart. I'll tell you, about a week ago, I got a phone call from a guy. Some of you may know who he is. His name's Chris Plant. He does a syndicated show for Westwood, and he's on MAL in Washington. He called me because 20 years ago, we had been at a cocktail party together, and he had recently been fired from CNN. He worked at the Pentagon as a producer there, actually. And so I'm talking to Chris Plant, and I said, I want to have lunch with you tomorrow. And he's like, okay. So we get together for lunch, and I said, who do you like on the radio? And he goes, I don't listen to talk radio. I don't know. And I put him on the air that very weekend, because, and what he was saying when he called me, he's like, why did you hire me? I had no radio experience. And I said, because you had 3 things going for you. You're very smart, you're funny, and you have an opinion on everything. So it's like if you take those 3 pillars, basically, if somebody's smart, entertaining, as we've talked about, and if they are opinionated and they're focused on sticking to that, kind of like you said earlier about Rush, I think that those are the things that you have to look for. It's very elusive right now to find those people because they don't think about radio as being the place where they can make their mark, but we still reach millions and millions of people.
And the role of podcasting?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's still very much evolving. Everybody had a podcast 3 years ago, especially coming out of COVID. Then I think that people realized that it's a lot harder to do than just sitting down in front of a microphone. And secondly, if you're going to monetize it, you have to have scale. And so I think it will continue to evolve, but it's usually going to be people who have made their mark doing something else.
Phil, finding
Yeah.
talent?
Yeah, podcasting is where I look for new talent now. With the radio side, all the beachfront properties taken. So, but podcasting, all the beachfront properties never going to be taken. There's miles and miles and miles of beach. So that's where I look for new talent. And everybody thinks they can be a podcaster, but you're right, Chris, not everybody can, and the metrics are different. There's some things that I've learned. We started the Salem Podcast Network 5 years ago, and I was very fortunate. I found 2 horses to pull the wagon, Charlie Kirk and Dinesh D'Souza, and they both took off. And then I was able to put Trish Regan on, and now I've got Laura Trump on my team, so I've got some pretty big names. But the truth is, it's very, very hard to succeed as a podcaster. You need DPEs. What's that? Downloads per episode. That's the main metric that I look at. How many downloads per episode are you able to get? And if you can't get 35,000 downloads per episode, you're probably not going to succeed. Because that's what it takes to go to an advertiser and tell them, I want you to buy time on this podcast. They want to know that they've got ears that they're going to reach. And if you can't reach 35,000, or actually double that, because we've got 2 ears, you can't reach that number, then you're probably not going to succeed. The other metric that I look at for a podcaster is, what is your social media footprint? It's amazing how, and I'm guilty of this because I'm an old radio guy. I didn't pay attention to social media like the young people that are 20 and 30 years old today did. So I didn't grow up with that. I had to learn that. But if you don't have 1 million followers on social media, you're probably not going to succeed as a podcaster, because that's the way that you let people know, your fans, that I've got a podcast, that I put it up there. How do you reach them? Well, when I put Dinesh and Charlie on, they both had about 1 million followers on Facebook and 1 million followers on Instagram and 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. Now you take those stats and you can make a podcast out of those, but today those stats are like triple or quadruple for those guys because they keep growing it. You have to keep growing it. If you don't know how to grow your social media footprint, get a guy who does, that helps you, that consults with you. For me, when I have podcasters coming to me all the time, and I had a good call yesterday with a new young podcaster that I think could make it, I get frustrated that they don't understand all of this. They don't check the boxes. They don't, and so what I've decided to do is create a farm team. I'm going to create a farm team of young up-and-coming podcasters that I can coach and help and eventually fix those gaps in their mantra, and then turn them into a Salem podcaster. But they've got to get those check boxes checked first. So that's kind of my focus right now. And if anybody out there wants to be a podcaster, maybe you can join my farm team.
Yeah, it's a very nice invitation. Pete, where are you finding talent? How are you developing them?
Well, I think sports talk is a great space as well to look, and I'm biased when I say that because that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I was for the first 10 years of my career. I had a moment doing an overnight show on CBS Sports Radio where a guy calls in at 2 a.m. in July and asks about the Eagles wide receiver core, and I said, who gives a shit? I said that to myself, not on the air. But I thought, what am I going to care about in my late 30s, my late 40s, my late 50s? What do I actually think I'm going to care about at those ages? And I think that there's a lot of guys like that in sports talk that have come to that conclusion. You look at Clay Travis, you look at Jason Whitlock, you see what's going on with Stephen A. Smith right now. And that's happening on the local level too. I hear from a lot of people I worked with in the sports talk arena that want to move over to news or more general talk, and they're wise to do that because there's an oversaturation, I believe, in the sports talk format right now. And as these individuals get older, I think your interests change. What you want to talk about changes. When you have a family, what you care about changes. You're still a sports fan, but do you want to grind that out every day? So I think sports talk is a great avenue for us to be looking for future talent on the news side.
Drew.
Yeah, I first of all, I agree with Pete, and I know Bennett Zier is here from WRVA in Richmond. I think he's on the panel next. We helped Bennett put in a new morning show host at WRVA who came from Sports Talk, right? And I think, to your point, there are a number of people who are in that format that feel like I've got so much more to say, but I'm limited to what I can in the format. So I do think that's a great place. I like social as well. I also like the traditional looking at the farm team on a local radio station. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of those that are out there and available. But I think, I mean, there's a guy here today, makes me happy to see Skylar Cooper, who does Afternoon Drive on KRMG in Tulsa, young guy, and he spent his money to come to this conference today. I love seeing that. I love seeing people making an investment in their own careers. So, and you do find that still at a lot of smaller stations. So I think those are two great spots. I also agree with what Phil said and Chris said as well.
You know, one of the things that Scott Jennings said, and it was great because it is the enthusiasm of youth. And I turned to Chris and said, when Scott said, and WHAS let me be a board op, right?
Allowed me to be a board
yeah,
op.
allowed, and I was like, that's what you want to hear, is somebody's going, woo, I get to be a board op? And that enthusiasm is still there. Let me jump to ratings and also a question on the FM. Last night, Steve Kamer, a friend of mine, we had a dinner, there were a number of us together, Chris Olivera was there. I asked about when 1010 wins went to FM as well, did the age drop down? And he said about 10 years. Are you seeing that in St. Louis and places?
I think it's early in St. Louis, but yes. I mean, I think natural progression is you just open the audience to more ears. I mean, you open the brand to more ears, right? And so, naturally, that tends to be on the younger side, as older people, at least from an AM position, have been accustomed to that platform. So I think that's a natural thing to see happen as stations move from AM to FM. And again, I know they've been happening for many years now, but it's nice to see that continuing to occur.
And so to the 3 minutes then. We saw what Jason showed at the beginning, and we do see an increase. It's not the 15% that was projected, but, Pete, starting with you, thoughts on where we are in the 3 minutes in PPM markets for this format?
I think as Jason noted, it's early. We saw that huge spike in the first quarter. How much of that is the news cycle that we had with the inauguration, Trump coming back in? We don't know yet. We haven't done any clock changes, but the one thing I have done, and it's more of a feel thing than anything else, we usually bow tie our clocks, break 13:15 or 43:45. There are times where I will sweep the quarter hour, maybe 5-10% of the time. If I'm feeling it with a caller, a topic, whatever's going on, it's like calling an audible at the line of scrimmage. There are times when I'll say, I think I've got this thing humming where I can take this to 18 or 48 and just capture that 3 minutes right now versus having a great tease and hoping they come back or they're still there. So it's not often. I try to stay by the principles, but there are times now with a 3-minute rule that I'll sweep it. I thought 5 was too much to really try to get to that 20 or 50 mark, because on the back end, you don't have anything to work with. But with 3 minutes, you can still sweep it, have a 4 to 5 minute break, and still have yourself 3 to 6 minutes on the back end to try to capture it if you didn't get it on the front side. So there are times when I've done that now with a 3 minute rule that I was not considering with a 5 minute rule.
I think kind of along those lines too, teases have become such a art to do an effective tease to get people to stay through that 4 or 5 minute break. Use AI. AI is unbelievable with teases. If you put in there exactly what you want to say, and you want to say it as a broadcast tease, I want to hold my audience for 4 minutes, and I'm going to have an interview or a topic coming up, it will kick out something in seconds that is better than anything that you could do. So that's a good use of AI, and if you're not using AI for teases, you should be.
I mean, it is important because these are individual minutes and don't have to be continuous to get that audience to come back 2, 3, 4 times, a day or an hour, whatever it comes out to. But Phil, your take on where we are? I know you're a numbers guy from way back.
Yeah. My reaction to Nielsen is, what took you so long? What took you so long? We knew that the PPM was flawed from the beginning, and especially downplayed the ratings of AM and News Talk. You knew that in 2006. So why did you wait so long, so many years to try to fix it? And I don't know if this is going to fix it. When they came out with PPM, if you recall, certain formats did better than others. And actually, the first iteration of PPM was fairly kind to News Talk. But who wasn't kind to were the urban stations. And the urban stations were all taking a hit because the urban stations TSL dropped tremendously when they realized people are not listening as long as they were writing down in the diary. So what did they do? They twisted it. They took the numbers and artificially manipulated them. And all of a sudden, the urban stations started to do a whole lot better. To me, if you can manipulate these numbers, they're not real. So it's now we're playing to the manipulation, and that's what's concerning to me. I wish that they would do more, and I think there is more they can do, but you know, what took you so long?
Is it cum or AQH?
Well, I look at both. You know, I think the advantage we have at News Talk is that our listeners listen for a long time. And that's because of hosts that can capture your imagination. You can listen to a host now for 2 or 3 hours and still stay there. Whereas with music, you're bouncing all over the place. So you've got to look at TSL. And of course, if you get enough cum and you get enough TSL, you can increase your AQH.
You know, I don't know that I have an opinion on the 3-minute qualifier at this point. I think Nielsen is challenged in methodology right now for a number of different reasons, and I think those challenges are more and more real every day, especially when it comes to panel recruitment and finding a panel of willing participants. And then for news and news talk, you know, our challenge is it's hard to find the types of people who tend to listen to our format that want to participate, right? And so Nielsen apparently moving from a 2-year to 3-year panel, I think that is also a concern, you know, for us, and I think it will create additional challenges for the format, unfortunately.
It's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I agree with all of you that we haven't seen enough yet. I wish we could have, because they are, the difference between this and when PPM launched is we had trial in a couple markets, Houston being one of them when PPM launched. But this, they could see the info. They could go back and look at it and see how the calculations are. And so I wish they would have run all of 2024 with 3 minutes so we were truly comparing year over year for the months so we could see something. Because how do I know we wouldn't be down and that we are down? How do I really know if you're being that serious? Now, I guess you can argue, does it matter? You know, because by 2026, we'll have a year, and we'll be able to look at it. But right now, I think it's very difficult to know exactly what we're looking at, because I just don't think we know. We just don't know.
And 2024 was an election year, too, which is always, you know, for our format, people tune in, people tune out.
Well, you mentioned, Pete mentioned Philadelphia. When the numbers first came out, and they said sports looks like it's going to be huge. Well, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. And at that point in January, based on the PPM calendar, they were in a playoff run. So there is the news cycle as well that's going to impact this format always. We're going to open up to questions in a second. I want to start with Phil, though, on one round of everyone asking the question, where is this format going? What's next?
You know, that's a good question. I don't think anybody knows for sure. I think that our audience is still there. I think our audience is very loyal, but our audience is aging. And my biggest concern is that anybody under 30 didn't grow up on AM talk or even FM talk. They grew up not even on radio. And so we've got to capture the imagination of those young people and bring them back to radio. And I think that can happen. Just like we're seeing young males turning more conservative. Who would have thought that could happen? Things can change, but we have to be good. We have to be ready for them. We don't want to be your grandfather's radio station. We want to be ready for those people that get ready for us. So it's a big challenge going forward. And just like we were saying about the 3-minute rule, we don't know how that's going to turn out. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I'm fascinated to see the next chapter, and I'm just going to hold on with my fingertips and, you know, like everybody else, and try to make it work.
Pete.
Yeah, I think that Phil brings up a great point with young men being a recruiting ground for the format, and thinking about what their interests are too beyond just the diehard political news of the day is important. Living their lifestyle, understanding what else they care about. They're probably also sports fans culture-wise. What are they interested in to give them a show that they find compelling? Because if not, if you want to just get hyper-served a specific topic, there's a podcast for that out there. I mean, podcasts are so niche by nature, there is something for them that they can find and they can get it whenever they want. So what are we going to bring them to the radio for? And I think social media, too, is where they're at. Now, we used to think about using social media to kind of drive radio extra listening, but what about using social media to get people over to the radio by just hammering your frequency, your call letters, and people realizing, young people who didn't grow up on it, oh yeah, this thing in the car turns on and there's someone talking out of it and it's engaging and compelling and it's personal and it's all these things that we love, but it's also live, right? That's something they're not going to get on a podcast. And when stuff happens in real time, it's there for me. That person is there for me every day at the same time. So using social media where they are to leverage them over to radio, I think is something that we need to kind of think about in a reverse psychology kind of way. And that will be beneficial for the format as well.
True.
Yeah, I think it's multi-platform distribution. I mean, basically what Pete's saying. I think you've got to use every tool in your tool belt to not only market and share your brand, but the personalities have to be engaged in that process as well. And so I love seeing stations. Obviously, we saw that with Scott, where it's a video. There's video included. It's taking the best moments and leveraging those best moments across social networks. It's putting the content in pods, taking an entire show, taking great segments, and trying to get frequency and multiple platform distribution as a just part of the nature of what we do. And that's still a challenge for a lot of hosts today.
I think also that, you talked about the farm team for podcasters. We don't have a farm team for program directors at all. And I think that, that's a real concern, that we can look at this and see how it's going to evolve. And multi-platform distribution, absolutely. But we have to have people and talent who understand, who will be able to succeed us, in another decade or more. So when you take a look at some of the younger talent that's on the air and we listen to them, it's like I think to myself sometimes, they're not really following some of the basic things that we've always taught. But maybe it's like Rush Limbaugh. Maybe we don't know what the people who are actually entering the demo know. And so we need to at least keep an open mind on that too. But I do think that a bigger challenge is going to be finding the people who can actually program these products, whether they're stations or whatever.
I think producers, frankly, are good. If you can
A
find
lot of
somebody
producers
good.
now are basically board ops, I mean, truly.
Yeah, it's got to be a real producer, obviously, somebody who's mapping a show and putting it together and working with the talent. Questions? I can't see. Do we have questions? John.
Hey, everyone. John Wardock. Podcasting is getting disrupted by YouTube right now and the role of video. What do you think is going to be YouTube's role in the future of talk radio and news radio, say 3 to 5 years from now?
John is asking, he's saying podcasting is being interrupted by YouTube. What will the role of YouTube be in news talk radio?
I don't know if it's being interrupted, John, or if it's just the latest big platform. And they're so big right now. You're right. That's where most of the podcast audiences are. And the good thing about YouTube is they have very reliable metrics. Who doesn't have reliable metrics is Rumble. I don't believe the Rumble numbers, and I love the Rumble guys, but sometimes their numbers don't make sense to me. YouTube numbers make sense to me. And so when I look at a podcaster, I look at their audio downloads, which we put up on Omni, but I also look at the YouTube downloads. And you do have to do your podcast on video because video is king. And if you don't have a good-looking set, if you look like you're not made for television, you're probably not going to succeed.
I think another factor involving YouTube also is it lives after the broadcast. So anybody can basically go and look at it even as they can listen to podcasts of a radio show, but it's not appointment viewing. And I think TV is going to have a problem with that too.
It's basically a search engine is what it is. So, I think too, using AI for your post-production work on video is a key right now, because if you clip something from the show, you put it on YouTube, you ask AI, here's what I talked about, here's the topic, give me an SEO-friendly headline and description, give me my target keywords. You can pop it out in 5 seconds, you plug that into YouTube, and you're basically using that as a search engine for your show to once again try to drive people to a long-form podcast or the radio.
Well, and I mean, back to the social media part of it, so many folks, I'm a fan of Bill Maher. I'll mention to someone, you watch Bill Maher's show, and they'll say, no, but I follow him on Instagram. And so they get the reels and they see that. And that's obviously where all of our talent need to be. We have one more question, go ahead.
Yeah. With all due respect to you guys, I have great respect for all of you. And to ask this question, I'll tell you who I am. 25 years in St. Louis, morning guy, around Middle Haven. I had to record, and we do not subscribe to Arbitron. But to come here, I had to record 35 live spots to cover my spots while I'm here. Do you know how many podcasts I download and never listen to? So Phil, you say you count podcast downloads. We make our people listen to 3 minutes to get credit, but podcasts just get credit for a download. Here's my question. Facebook, YouTube, you name it, story after story, year after year of fake numbers. Made up numbers, click farms, all that is bogus. Nobody believes Nielsen. You guys run the industry. Why do we subscribe to Nielsen? It doesn't do any good. It doesn't do us any good. We survive and thrive as a one-person, family-run radio station. We are live and local from 5 a.m. to midnight. We have producers, we have call screeners, we have co-hosts, we have a fully functioning radio station.
Yeah, let me jump in, because
Right.
I think you've asked the question, which is why subscribe to Nielsen.
Let me answer that. I don't think you necessarily should, and most of my markets do not. In fact, the only reason we subscribed to Nielsen in 5 of our markets was because of the Fish station, which did generate, it was a younger FM-style Christian format, and it did generate significant numbers, and the only way you could go to the advertising agencies and sell it was to show them they want to see the numbers. So that's why we subscribed. So it was like a payoff. You pay them off to get your numbers. But for most of my talk stations, we don't subscribe, and I don't recommend it because we don't look at the numbers. You're right about the discrepancy on the download numbers. I commended YouTube because I think they are accurate, but I don't think Rumble is, and I think there's questions about some of the other ones. You see these massive numbers that then don't translate into advertisers, and they don't translate into audience reaction. The only reason that you look at these downloads is to find out how many people really are listening to this thing.
Well,
So,
and we don't have time to get into it, but the other thing is, that's all pennies on the dollar, as well. And so,
That's right.
Financially, over the air still generates more revenue. Thank you all, appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.